Hello, beautiful people. It's Lennan. Welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk about witchcraft and critical thinking. I was recently so inspired by the creators of Thinktober. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them. I will leave them below in the description. And each one of the creators, the content creators, have come out with a video talking on different points of critical thinking and linking it to the craft or witchcraft or magic, whichever. And I had some thoughts. So let's get into it. Okay. Right off the rip, I want to talk about the magical practices that frame what I'm talking about that would be relevant to me. Okay. And that's how I'm approaching critical thinking and witchcraft and magical practices. Okay. Rituals, spells, divination, spirit work, and energy work. So in those spheres, okay, are where critical thinking and discernment would be relevant for me. And I think that it's interesting that these creators have come at this topic of critical thinking and Thinktober, when for me, a witchcraft practice, crafting my practice throughout the years, I've learned that it is very heart-centered, not mind-centered. But that there is, when thinking on this, there is an importance to use the mind, not only the heart. And I think that that's where my inspiration went to, is that I really consider my witchcraft practice and my magical practice to be very heart-centered, like gut and heart and feelings and emotions, right? A lot of the topics that were raised about like discernment and not putting the magical elite on pedestals and things like that, I already do. I already do those things. But it did happen when I was a wee thing. When I wanted to get into the craft, I was like, oh my gosh, teach me, you know. Now, I will say that I have been incredibly blessed to have the ability to read something from a witchy book or listen to something on a witchy podcast, and if it didn't feel right, I was completely okay with blacking it out of that book, or just being like, okay, and not doing it, not ever feeling like I had to. So I feel incredibly blessed that I've never had to do that. But I know a lot of witchy people do, especially when they're coming to the craft and they know nothing. So I think that it's important to tell the new witches out there that come at it from a mind and a heart place. And when you're approaching it in critical thinking way, in the mind way, it's research, of course, but then it's also using your heart, using your gut and intuition, and you have to build both of those. So there's some things that I will say are important, I guess, in learning your craft, learning how to craft your practice. I want to go over today, it's a long preamble, I want to go over today some things that would be construed critical thinking that I do in my craft automatically. So instead of tackling one of the topics of discernment or personal gnosis or something like that, I actually want to talk about things that I do in my craft that I've always done that could be construed critical thinking, that could be helpful when talking about this topic. So let's get started. The first magical practice that we're going to tackle is ritual. Okay, now you can divide magic into 2 spheres. Okay, into 2 categories: high magic and low magic. High magic to me is like ceremonial magic, very ritual centered based magical practices like Thelema, and a ceremonial magician place. Okay, and then low magic is more folksy, which is my type of magic. It's more folksy, traditional. Okay, so low magic as in we're using mundane items for magical purposes. And when tackling ritual and you're looking up and you're looking something up and you're wanting to tackle something, you have to first and foremost know whether you would like your practice to be more high or low magic. That's it. Okay. Do you want to be very elaborate and high magic, and do you want to be low, or do you want to use the mundane things, be more folksy in your witchcraft? Both of them are fine. It's just when you're the critical thinking that I'm talking about in terms of like using your head for ritual is if I'm reading like the Llewellyn ceremonial magic book, but I am more folksy in nature, then it's really going to fill me with a lot of doubt and a lot of dread, because I'm like, this doesn't feel right, but I guess it's what I'm supposed to be doing because this book came out and says it so. So you have to mix the head. So reading that and knowing, okay, well, I don't really jive with doing any of these types of like elaborate rituals, then it might be beneficial for you to know that going in and go, okay, well, maybe I need to explore some low magic. Then you read a book on folk witchcraft or traditional witchcraft, and you might jive with those rituals a little bit more, you know? Just going to show like how you can mix your head and your heart in terms of ritual. And then of course, we'll get into this, but then you need to start doing some stuff. Okay. You need to start like getting away from the books and actually doing some stuff, which we'll tackle in a second. I want to kind of put energy and spirit. I do want to tackle personal gnosis in this for spirit and, energy. Okay. For spirits, working with spirits, you have to know what your belief structure is. Again, this is mixing heart and mind. For me, I'm an animist, right? But you could be polytheist. You could be a pantheist. You could be a soft polytheist, a hard polytheist. It doesn't really matter about the label. You just need to know what your relationship is to spirits, what you would like your relationship to be with spirits, and what you believe in terms of spirits. Do you believe in mythological creatures? Do you believe dragons ride in the next realm over, the next dimension? Do you believe that the land has spirits, that the animals have spirits, plants have spirits? Do you believe in, ancestors or human spirits in a way, people that have crossed over? So you need to know what you feel about spirits and about energy, right? So knowing those things already, okay, you need to like ask yourself these questions, because then when you approach certain texts or listen to something in a podcast, you'll already kind of know what light bulb is going to go off and what's not. Because if you don't believe in land spirits, or you don't believe that plants have spirits, then reading something on plant allies or the plant spirits and the correspondences therein, that's not going to resonate, and that's a division there between you and having the practice that's going to benefit you the most. So discernment. I think all of this is going to be discernment. Same thing with energy. I get most of my energy from energetic pockets through it's earth magic. Okay. It's earth magic. It is ley lines, it's grids, it's large-scale structures of the universe, it's black hole energy, it's void energy, it's chaos energy, it's meteor shower energy, it's storm weather energy. I can get energy from the earth and from the cosmos, and I utilize that, but then I also have to shake it off, and I can channel the energy and I can manipulate the energy. And knowing how you feel about these things, like if you don't think that I can channel like thunderstorm energy, if you don't believe that, then that's not going to get you anywhere, by thinking that you're going to go out there and tackle the thunderstorm, but yet you really don't believe it in here, then that's your critical mind and your heart at odds with each other. So for me, it's just about, knowing what you believe. I think that's the core of crafting your practice. Divination. Because I'm a tarot reader, in the beginning of my craft, I thought that I had to read every tarot book. Okay. I only ended up reading about 2 or 3. Really good ones, okay? I will say the 2 or 3 that I started with were really, really good, okay? And I've probably made videos on this on the channel before, but as a tarot and oracle reader, I thought about, I'll have to read this and read this. But then it dawned on me very quickly in my tarot and divination practice that I had to actually use the cards. I couldn't just read and know. You know, I journaled, I wrote all the meanings down. I was one of those kids that was bad in school, and I'd like had to run lines, you know, and my practice didn't really get off the ground until I was able to actually shuffle the deck and throw some cards down. And then it started to dawn on me that I can mix what I learned in the book with what my gut is telling me. And if the book is saying, the books, plural, are saying this is what this card means, and my gut is saying that, then I can link those two. Okay, so it's all about linking for me, the mind and the heart, the mind and the gut, the mind and the intuition. Again, you have to build that. Doubt does you no good, but doubt comes from fear-mongering. It comes from gatekeeping when it doesn't need to be there, okay? And it comes from you not knowing what your core beliefs are. All right, and then the last one we're going to tackle is spells, okay? There are two things that I do for spellcraft that I guess could be considered critical thinking. There is something that I do in my spell work that could be construed critical thinking that I have done since my craft inception, and that is use the 7 deadly sins. I think I made a video about this a long time ago on the channel. It's coming at my spellcraft and asking myself whether I'm coming at this intention and this spell work, or this specific spell, with any of the 7 deadly sins. Anger, pride, greed, sloth, envy, gluttony, and lust. Is my intention coming from any of those 7 places? Bar none, if I feel like I'm coming from an envious place, or, you know, a lust place, or a pride place, very prideful, vain place, I won't even do it. Okay, so first things first, right off the riff, if I'm going to do a spell, I'm going through the 7 deadly sins. Now, that does not mean that I have to be virtuous. That I have to be virtuous in my spellcraft. Ooh, flying here. That I have to be virtuous or use the 7 virtues, okay, because it's not true. That's not true. I just want to know in my heart space whether I'm coming at this from the sin place. And it's only because those are good guidelines for me. Those are good, they're very good text blocks for me to keep my parameters going, to keep my boundaries, and to keep me focused. Because my magic isn't going to do me any good if I'm coming from heightened emotional places. I've got to keep that heart in a good place. Mixing with the mind, okay? You know, got to keep them in good standards. So that's right off the rip, that's what I do. Then I have to look at which sections the spells are in, okay? And there are 5 sections that I look at. So after I look at the 7 deadly sins, I'm looking at whether or not it fits in one of these 5 realms: self, success, love, money, and health. So I tack off the 7 deadly sins, and then I say, okay, well, which realm is it in? You know? And that helps me to get down to the essence of the spell and the essence of the intention. And I think that that's a part of critical thinking that I like to do in terms of crafting spells. And crafting a lot of my magic, to be honest with you. If I'm doing magic, I want to know which category it's in. Bare bones work. Using someone else's work as inspiration, not truth. I've always been pretty good at discernment and knowing what feels right, and knowing what, if it doesn't feel right, not to doubt that I have to do that, or fear, or like gatekeep, you know, gaslight myself as to, oh, I have to do that because it's in this book, or I've heard this somewhere, or I heard this from the magical elite. Just because those people are saying that it's true doesn't mean that you yourself can't mix head and heart and figure out if it actually works. So I come up with what I like to call bare bones work, bare bones spells. And that is, if I have a spell for a specific intention, and let's say that intention is in one of those 5 realms, then of course there may be multiple times I do a spell that revolve around health or that revolve around love. And they're not going to have the exact same intention though. But I could have bare bones spells for love or health, right? Or bare bones in terms of like these herbs work for health. These herbs work for love. You know, I can actually corroborate that with these resources and I can just link it all. So I like to have some bare bone spells like in my, you know, Book of Shadows for me to like flip back to. And then for whatever I'm doing the spell for, like in terms of intention work, the bare bones sits here. And then I'm like, okay, well, it's a love spell. So I've got this and this and this as the bare bones. But this is helping me with my intention today. This is going to help with this, and this is going to help with this. I can add the meat, you know, the muscle and the skin and whatever else, and the organs. I can add all of it to the skeleton for that specific intention. But I might have a bare bone that go into one of those 5 categories. So I guess you could say that that's a little critical thinking. One really cool critical thinking thing that we could do in our magic and witchcraft practices that I haven't heard anyone talk about is we can use the scientific method. Yeah. It's basically, my spell work is basically doing the scientific method. Now, the scientific method is where you have a question, okay? You're asking yourself something. You're coming up with a basic intention, right? Basic. Well, once you have a basic intention and question, the question I would probably ask myself is, am I coming from one of the 7 deadly sins? And which of the 5 categories, self, success, love, money, and health, is it coming from one of those 5? Those are the questions. And then I kind of come up with like jizzle that down into an intention, which is the question, okay? And then I have to research. I have to go back. If I have one, I have a bare bones, right? I have to look that up. What's my bare bone? Then I have to look up other correspondences, but also look up the correspondences. And then I've already experimented with what I feel, what my gut's telling me, and I've added those together. And then that's part of my research, okay? Also, you could research things outside of this as well. Many of the other creators have talked about like how you can research further something that you've read about. So say somebody said, oh, this means love, you know, this correspondence means love. You can go back and back and back and back. Most likely, okay, the correspondences that we have come from the mystics, okay? Agrippa, John Dee, Solomon, Hermes, Blavatsky, you know, Crowley. A lot of our correspondences probably derive from some of those mystics, the mystic philosophy, the occult philosophies, if you will, just to corroborate. That's it. So you can do that research as well in this research stage. The next method in the scientific method, the next stage is hypothesis. The hypothesis stage. In the hypothesis stage, you hypothesize and think about the possible outcomes of your spell. You're hypothesizing what your spell is going to do for you. Okay? You could tweak this and go into a little law of attraction, and go and try to manifest it in that way as well, in terms of visualization or scripting, really living out the spell could probably go in the hypothesis stage, which we're thinking about the future, right? Then you have to actually do it, which is the experiment stage in the scientific method. You have to actually do the spell. The experiment is the spell. You have to actually do it and know that if it doesn't work, then something in the other stages might have been wonky, right? Your research wasn't really up to par, you weren't really feeling it, or You didn't use your gut, right? In the hypothesis stage, you really didn't like try to link the head with the heart. Or your intention is based off of one of the things that I've talked about, and you didn't really get down to your core beliefs in terms of those things as well. So one of the previous stages was wonky, and that's why a spell couldn't work. But we get to that in the next stage, which is analysis. So we've done the spell in experiment, then we have to analyze what we've done. So all that means is if it's a short-term spell, specifically, then you could pretty much tell right away whether, within a good time frame, whether the spell worked, right? If it's a long term, you're gonna have to wait for that, but if it's a short term spell, then you might not have to wait very long to figure out if it worked or not. Again, if it didn't, you could go back to the previous stages, and that's an analysis. And then conclusion is, to me, knowing whether you would want to do this spell again, even if it worked. Even if the spell has worked, doesn't mean you have to keep doing it. You can do a different spell every freaking time you want to do a spell. I have done a million spells, and I don't do them very often. I really don't. I like to do spells, but I like to change it up. I keep my bare bone spells. And because I'm like Alice, and I'm a different person today, I'm not myself, sir, I come at my witchcraft in that respect. So doing the same spells over and over again is like Einstein says, doing something over and over again, expecting different results is insanity. I don't want my witchcraft to be insanity. So it's like doing the same spell for different things because I'm a different person each time I would do a certain spell. And if I feel like I have to do the same spell over and over again, what the hell? I need to get back to basics. Like, obviously it didn't work the first time. So I try to change my spells up. And that's in the conclusion part. Just letting myself know, that was fun. That I jived with that. That resonated. And it worked. Pow. Let me write it down because I want to come back to this in the future. That's a conclusion. Now the last one is another portion of critical thinking for me. And that's communication. This is that method. This is the stage in the scientific method that so many content creators, podcast creators, authors that are in the witchy world, okay, right now, or in the past, they come at this scientific method and they've done this and this and this and this, and then they want to share it. They want to share it. When something good happens to me, especially in my witchcraft, I want to tell someone, or I'd like to. I don't have anyone in my offline life that I can, but I'd like to be able to talk to people about it. And I think that a lot of creators should come at it from this place, like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, let me show you what I did, let me share it. But again, discern and disclose. I think that is important. I think that certain authors either miss some steps in the scientific method and it's not really verified, or it's personal gnosis and they didn't really tell you that it was personal gnosis. So it's all about knowing. It's not, to me, it's not so much trusting someone else. It's about trusting yourself. Okay? When you read something and it just seems like someone's personal gnosis, or it feels like they missed a step, right? It's all on what you feel. So it's heart-centered. And then it's mixing that with the mind. So going, okay, I really enjoyed this book. I don't agree with everything you've said. I might try out one of your spells, but I'm going to break it down to its essence, change some things up, and like maybe have a bare bone spell built from what you've inspired me to do. And I think that when we can come at our practice with certain mentors in the community, we should come at the magical elite, certain authors, certain witchy people that are putting themselves out there. I think that it should be trusting yourself when approaching someone else's craft. I think that it's more important to craft your own practice. And I guess most importantly, in terms of the communication stage of the scientific method, don't sell someone else's shit. Okay? Don't sell someone else's stuff. You know? If someone else actually came up with this and it can be corroborated, don't put it off as your own, you know? That's pretty much all I would say. Don't steal somebody else's stuff. But all in all, I think that if you approach your magic practice with heart and mind, you will actually craft a practice that will benefit you. Now, I did touch on core beliefs for like a second there. Let me go over the limiting core beliefs that could be stopping you from building your own craft, that are making it to where you aren't trusting yourself. You know, you're not putting yourself into your craft. And I wrote them down here. What are they? Entitlement, abandonment, helplessness, responsibility, unlovable, and defectiveness. Those are core beliefs, limiting core beliefs. Okay? So are you like I do, coming at my magic looking through the lens of the 7 deadly sins? Am I coming from one of those places? And which 5 of the success, love, health, money, and love category is it coming from? But then also, you could ask yourself, are any of the things that I would be doing in my magical practice coming from a place of entitlement? Coming from a place of abandonment? Coming from a place of defectiveness? Unlovable? You know, do you believe you're unlovable? And responsibility. Do you feel you're responsible for, like, getting that video out or doing that spell and showing it off, right? Do you feel like that's a responsibility of yours? No, I guess these are good questions to ask. Okay, so there were a little of my thoughts on the critical thinking and witchcraft and for Thinktober. Please go check out everyone else. Click the hashtag in case someone else has done a VR to all the original creators. Hope to see all of you again. Much love.